At 78, Sally Struthers reveals shocking truth about Carroll O'Connor. For 50 years, everyone believed Carroll O'Connor was the loud-mouthed, stubborn Archie Bunker we saw on TV. But at 78, Sally Struthers just broke her silence, and what she revealed about him left Hollywood speechless. Before the bright lights, before the laughter tracks, Sally Struthers was just a little girl in Portland, Oregon, a shy kid with big eyes and bigger dreams. Her father, a respected surgeon, was the picture of success, right up until the day he walked out. Sally was 10 years old. That night, her life split in two, the life she had and the one she had to build from the pieces. Her mother, Margaret, suddenly had 2 daughters to raise and a mountain of bills she couldn't climb. But Sally watched her mom fight, quietly, relentlessly, and she learned something powerful: how to survive. Years later, that same survival instinct became the heartbeat of every role she played. Behind every smile, every laugh, every fiery speech as Gloria Stivic, there was that little girl who refused to fall apart. And maybe that's why audiences felt something real in her. Because when Sally cried on screen, it wasn't acting, it was memory. But Hollywood doesn't hand out happy endings. Not right away. Sally had to claw her way through a sea of auditions, rejection letters, and "you're not the right type." Until one day, one tiny role would open a door she never knew existed. It was 1970. Sally got a small part in 5 Easy Pieces, acting opposite Jack Nicholson, Hollywood's bad boy, already on the rise. Her role, barely a few minutes on screen. But when the cameras rolled, something happened. She wasn't supposed to steal the scene, but she did. Critics noticed the spark, that strange magnetic mix of innocence and raw emotion that made you look twice. It wasn't loud, it wasn't forced, it was real. And here's the twist: that tiny role didn't just get her noticed, it put her in the path of one of television's most groundbreaking shows, All in the Family. When she got the call to audition, Sally almost didn't go. She'd heard the rumors. The scripts were risky, the subjects controversial, and the man playing the father, Carroll O'Connor, had a reputation for being tough. But she went anyway. What she didn't know was that this man, the one everyone called difficult, the one about to become the most talked-about TV dad in America, would change her life forever. Because behind Archie Bunker's insults was a truth that no one saw coming. And 50 years later, Sally Struthers is finally ready to tell it. It's 1971. Television is safe, predictable. Families smile, neighbors wave, and no one dares to mention politics at the dinner table. Then, out of nowhere, a new show bursts onto the scene. All in the Family. The scripts, controversial. The dialogue, dangerous. And the man at the center of it all, Carroll O'Connor as Archie Bunker, was about to flip American television upside down. Sally Struthers was just 23 when she walked into that audition. She wasn't famous, she wasn't a star. She was nervous, clutching her script, surrounded by actors older, bolder, louder. But when she opened her mouth, something electric happened in the room. She wasn't just reading lines, she was Gloria. Raw, fiery, emotional, real. The young woman who loved her father but couldn't stand his outdated beliefs. Norman Lear, the show's creator, looked at Carroll O'Connor, then back at Sally, and they both just knew. She was it. The perfect daughter for America's most controversial father. But when Sally first stepped on set, she admits she was terrified. This wasn't just another sitcom. It was live fire. They were talking about race, war, women's rights, things no one else dared to say on TV. She remembers sitting in the corner before filming, hands shaking, wondering if she could even do it. That's when Carroll walked over, looked her in the eye and said, "You're not just playing a character, kid. You're giving a voice to a generation that's been ignored." That one sentence hit her like lightning. It wasn't just acting anymore, it was purpose. From that day forward, Gloria Stivic wasn't a role. She was a statement. Week after week, audiences watched Archie and Gloria clash, father against daughter, tradition against progress. What they didn't know was that behind those on-screen battles was a bond so genuine it felt like real life. People thought Archie hated his daughter, but Carroll, he adored Sally like one of his own. Behind the cameras, the All in the Family set was a world of contradictions. One moment you'd hear roaring laughter, the next you'd feel the tension of a nation divided reflected in their scripts. But for Sally, that set became home. And Carroll O'Connor, he became the steady heartbeat of it all. She remembers the very first week of filming. The show hadn't even aired yet, and the entire cast could feel it. Something special was happening. The writing was sharp, the themes were bold, but it was Carroll's energy that made everything click. On screen, he was loud, stubborn, impossible. Off screen, he was gentle, even protective. Sally recalls one night after a tough taping. The topics that week had been heavy: prejudice, poverty, and generational anger. She sat alone in her dressing room, exhausted, tears rolling down her face. Carroll quietly knocked, stepped in, and said, "Hey kiddo, you okay? You carried a lot of weight out there today." That's who he really was. Not Archie the bigot, but Carroll, the caretaker. He'd check in, make sure everyone was grounded, and remind them all that the work mattered more than the fame. Because fame, it came fast. Overnight, All in the Family was everywhere. Magazine covers, talk shows, protests. America couldn't stop talking about it. But the pressure, it was crushing. Sally was suddenly the face of a cultural revolution. Reporters asked her about feminism, politics, war, things she was still figuring out herself. And whenever she felt overwhelmed, Carroll was there. He'd tell her, "Don't let them define you. You're already enough." It became their secret mantra, the phrase she'd whisper to herself before every live audience taping. But Carroll wasn't always serious. Between takes, he'd break the tension with his mischievous Irish humor. He'd tell long, ridiculous jokes that had Gene Stapleton crying with laughter, Sally doubled over, and Norman Lear yelling, "Carroll, we're losing daylight." And somehow that chaos, that laughter, is what kept them all sane. That's why the show worked. Because it wasn't just a sitcom. It was a family. Even when Archie and Gloria were screaming at each other about politics, there was real love underneath it. That invisible thread between Sally and Carroll, it never snapped. Years later she'd say, "We fought like family on screen because we were family off screen." And if that sounds too perfect to be true, just wait. Because what Carroll O'Connor did for her after the cameras stopped rolling, when the fame faded and the world moved on, proves that this bond was far deeper than television ever showed. When All in the Family finally ended in 1978, the world thought Sally Struthers would disappear with it. Another TV star forever trapped in one role. But Sally, she wasn't done, not even close. People forget, she was just 30 when she walked off that soundstage for the last time. And instead of chasing safe sitcoms or fading into nostalgia, she did something bold. She went dark. Her next move shocked everyone. In 1972, she had already appeared in The Getaway, a gritty crime thriller with Steve McQueen and Ali MacGraw. No laugh tracks, no cozy living rooms, just danger, sweat, and desperation. The industry whispered, "She can't do that. She's the sweet daughter from All in the Family." But then audiences saw it, and they were floored. Gone was the innocent Gloria. In her place stood a woman with layers, pain, and power. Sally had reinvented herself right in front of their eyes. Then came Intimate Strangers in 1977, a made-for-TV movie that changed television itself. She played a woman trapped in an abusive marriage, a topic so taboo back then that network executives wanted to bury the film. But Sally fought for it. She said, "If one woman sees herself in this story and finds the strength to walk away, then it's worth every risk." The film aired. Millions watched. And for the first time, primetime TV forced America to face the hidden epidemic inside its own homes. Critics called her fearless. She didn't care about being likable. She cared about being honest. That courage came straight from Carroll O'Connor's lessons. Truth first. Comfort second. But here's the thing about Hollywood. It doesn't reward truth for long. When the cameras move on, so does the attention. By the early 80s, Sally was fighting a new battle, one every woman in the industry faces: age, image, relevance. And just when it seemed the spotlight was fading, life threw her a plot twist even she didn't see coming. It was December 1977, just before Christmas, when Sally walked down the aisle to marry Dr. William C. Rader. To the world, it looked perfect. A rising actress, an accomplished psychiatrist. Beauty and brains. Hollywood smiled, the cameras flashed, and for a moment it looked like she had it all. But behind the flashbulbs, the story was far more complicated. William was brilliant but intense, a man fascinated by the human mind, sometimes more than by the people around him. Sally, meanwhile, was exhausted from fame and desperate for something real. For a few golden years, they made it work. They laughed, traveled, built a home. And then came the best day of her life, the birth of their daughter, Samantha. Sally always said that becoming a mother was like seeing the world in color for the first time. Samantha wasn't just her child, she was her reason. Between shows and rehearsals, Sally would rush home just to read her a bedtime story. Fame could wait, motherhood couldn't. But the pressure of balancing Hollywood and home life began to show. Her husband's career took a controversial turn. He started promoting alternative psychiatric treatments that many in the medical community condemned. The tabloids smelled blood. Suddenly, the same media that once called Sally America's daughter began whispering about her marriage, her choices, her silence. And through it all, she did what she'd learned from her mother decades earlier. She smiled in public and cried in private. By January 1983, the fairy tale was over. The divorce became final. No scandals, no shouting, just heartbreak. Sally packed up her life and focused on the one role that truly mattered, being a mom. Friends say she could have broken down, but she didn't. She took her pain, her loneliness, and turned it into drive. She kept working, kept performing, kept living. Because as she once said in an interview, "I've already lost a father, a marriage, and a spotlight. What's left to lose? Only time. And I'm not wasting it. It's raw. It's real." And it's the moment Sally Struthers stopped being America's sweetheart and became her own woman. But what came next would test her heart all over again. Because years later, when she least expected it, Carroll O'Connor would re-enter her life. And what he did then proved that behind every legend, there's a story no one ever dared to tell. It had been nearly 2 decades since All in the Family ended. Sally had moved on, or at least she thought she had. She was doing theater, voice acting, charity work. Life was steady, predictable, until one phone call changed everything. It was Carroll O'Connor. His voice a little slower, a little softer now, but unmistakable. "Hey kid, I'm doing a new show. I need you." Sally froze. It had been years since they'd worked together. The idea of sharing a stage with him again felt surreal, like walking back into a dream you weren't sure you wanted to wake up from. But she said yes. Because how do you say no to the man who helped build your career, who believed in you before anyone else did? When they reunited on set, time seemed to collapse. Carroll, older, wiser, but still full of mischief, looked at her the same way he always had. And Sally, she couldn't believe how much she'd missed him. The jokes, the warmth, the quiet protection, it all came rushing back. But there was something different this time, something heavier behind his eyes. During breaks, he'd sit in the corner, lost in thought. He'd talk about life, about regret, about how fame never really fills the empty spaces. And one day, he looked at Sally and said something she would never forget. "You know, they all thought Archie was the loud one. But truth is, I was just hiding behind the noise." She didn't fully understand what he meant, not then. But a few years later, she would. Because behind the laughter and the legacy, Carroll O'Connor was fighting a war no one saw coming. One that would leave him shattered, and the entire world stunned. It was June 1995. Hollywood woke up to devastating news. Carroll O'Connor's only son, Hugh, had taken his own life. A father's worst nightmare, a pain so deep that even words couldn't reach it. The story spread like wildfire. The tabloids circled, but Sally Struthers didn't see a headline. She saw her friend, broken. She flew to him as soon as she heard. No cameras, no press, just heart. She said later, "There are no scripts for moments like that. There's only silence and holding someone while they fall apart." Carroll was never the same. He spoke openly about Hugh's addiction, about the dealer who fed it, and about the justice system that failed his son. He turned his grief into purpose, becoming an outspoken advocate against drug abuse. But those who knew him best, Sally included, could see it. The light inside him had dimmed. Sally stayed by his side through the aftermath, through the interviews, through the quiet dinners when no one else showed up. He would tell her, "You know, kid, you're the last one who still remembers who I really was." And she did. She remembered the man who had comforted her after long nights of filming. The one who taught her that courage wasn't loud, it was quiet. The one who believed in her before the world did. When Carroll passed away in 2001, Sally said it felt like losing family all over again. At the funeral, she sat in the back pew, not as a celebrity, but as a daughter saying goodbye to her second father. Years later, in interviews, she still can't talk about him without tearing up. "He saved me more times than I can count," she once whispered, "and I just hope he knew that." It's not the kind of Hollywood story you read in magazines. It's the kind you feel, the kind that reminds you that even the biggest stars are still just people trying to hold on to each other in the storm. And maybe that's why Sally Struthers' story still matters. Because behind the laughter, the controversy, the fame, there was always love. Real, messy, human love. And that's the part the cameras never showed. For decades, Sally Struthers stayed silent. While Hollywood moved on, rebooted and rewrote history, she held the real story close to her heart. Not because she was hiding it, but because it was too sacred to cheapen with headlines. When interviewers brought up All in the Family, she smiled politely. But behind that smile was something deeper, a truth too heavy for morning TV segments or nostalgia talk shows. The truth: Carroll O'Connor wasn't just a co-star, he was her protector, her mentor, her emotional anchor in a world that often tried to tear her apart. In a time when the industry was ruthless, when actresses were replaced the moment they hit 30, Carroll fought for her. He went to producers, defended her paycheck, shielded her from tabloids, and once even shut down a press event because they were asking cruel sexist questions. "He treated me like family," Sally finally admitted years later, "and I don't think I realized how rare that was until he was gone." And that's the twist no one ever saw coming. Behind Archie Bunker's sharp tongue was a man who quietly defied the toxic side of Hollywood, not with speeches, but with action. Sally said, "If Carroll hadn't been there, I probably would have quit acting. The pressure, the judgment, it was brutal. But he saw something in me I didn't even see in myself." And maybe that's why she's finally speaking now. Because the truth isn't scandal, it's humanity. And in a world obsessed with gossip, Sally's story hits harder precisely because it's real. She's not exposing him, she's honoring him. And in doing so, she's exposing the system that never gave men like Carroll enough credit for their compassion. "Everyone remembers Archie's rants," she said, "but I remember Carroll's kindness. It's not the kind of Hollywood secret that breaks reputations. It's the kind that restores faith in people." And that's exactly why this revelation, after nearly half a century, is shaking fans all over again. Now, at 78 years old, Sally Struthers doesn't chase fame. She doesn't care about trends, awards, or Hollywood's short memory. She's seen it all, the highs, the heartbreaks, the betrayals. But when she talks about Carroll O'Connor, her entire tone changes. Her voice softens, her eyes light up, and suddenly the years fade away. "He taught me that your talent is a gift," she says, "but your kindness, that's your legacy." Those words define her now. When she performs in small theaters across America, when she speaks to young actors backstage, she repeats the same thing Carroll once told her. "Don't act to be seen. Act to say something that matters." And that's the message she wants the world to remember. Because fame fades, awards gather dust, but the people who treat others with empathy, those are the ones who never really disappear. Every time Sally steps on stage now, she says she still feels him there. In the laughter of the audience, in the silence between lines, in the reminder that love, the real kind, outlives even death. She doesn't need another hit show. She doesn't need another red carpet. Because her story, and Carroll's story, already changed television forever. All in the Family wasn't just about a loudmouth father and his liberal daughter. It was about America learning to listen to itself. And that's what Carroll and Sally represented. Two generations clashing, loving, forgiving. Now, decades later, Sally is making sure the world remembers that truth. Not the headlines, not the gossip, the truth. "If you want to know who Carroll O'Connor really was," she said in one interview, "don't watch the arguments. Watch the way Archie looked at Gloria when he was proud of her. That look, that was real. That was him." And with that one sentence, Sally Struthers gave the world something rare. A glimpse behind the curtain. A love story disguised as a sitcom. And a reminder that even in a world built on scripts and stage lights, the most powerful stories are the ones that come from the heart. Sally Struthers knows something now that she wishes she had known at 25. Fame isn't freedom, it's a bargain. And every spotlight comes with shadows you can't escape. Back in the 70s, the cameras loved her. She was America's daughter, Gloria Stivic, the voice of the new generation. But behind the laughter, Sally was quietly falling apart. She was overworked, underpaid compared to her male co-stars, and constantly scrutinized for her looks. Producers told her to lose weight or smile more, while critics wrote about her appearance instead of her acting. "You think you're living your dream," she once said, "but really, you're living inside a cage, and everyone's watching." Even when she won an Emmy, she couldn't enjoy it. Because the moment you reach the top in Hollywood, the countdown to your fall already begins. And when the spotlight moves on, the silence is deafening. Sally admitted there was a time she didn't even recognize herself anymore. She'd walk past mirrors and think, "Who was that woman?" Because the person on TV wasn't her. It was a character, shaped by what the world wanted her to be. And yet, in the middle of that chaos, Carroll O'Connor was her anchor. He saw through the noise. He saw the scared young woman trying to hold herself together. "He told me once," she recalled, "don't let them convince you that you're lucky to be here. You earned your place. You belong here." That one sentence saved her more than once. Now, at 78, when she looks back, Sally doesn't regret the fame, but she regrets believing it mattered so much. Because the truth is, all those years she spent chasing validation were the years she could have spent living freely, loving fully, and laughing without cameras watching. Her biggest lesson: the applause fades, the kindness doesn't. And that's the message she wants young artists, especially young women, to understand. Because in the end, fame doesn't define you. How you treat people does. When Sally talks about Carroll O'Connor today, it's not as a co-star, not even as a mentor. It's as someone who changed her life and never asked for credit. She says there's one moment she can never forget. It was years after All in the Family ended. They were sitting together at a small cafe in Los Angeles. No cameras, no scripts, just two old friends talking about life. And Carroll, staring at his coffee, said quietly, "You know, Sally, someday they'll forget Archie Bunker, but they'll never forget how that show made them feel." At the time she didn't get it, but now she does. Because that's what legacy really is. Not the fame, not the awards, but the feeling you leave behind. And that's exactly what Sally Struthers is doing now. She's touring small theaters, performing in plays, teaching young actors how to connect with an audience, not just entertain them. She laughs with fans, signs autographs, and always tells stories about Carroll. "Because if I stop telling them," she says, "then he really is gone. And I can't let that happen." There's something heartbreakingly beautiful about that. A woman who once stood in front of millions now finds her joy standing in front of hundreds. And yet, she's happier than ever. Because she finally understands what Carroll was trying to teach her all along. That the real reward in life isn't attention, it's connection. "We live in a world where everyone's screaming to be seen," she said. "But Carroll taught me that being remembered for love is worth more than being noticed for fame." And maybe that's why her story feels so different from the usual Hollywood tell-alls. It's not bitter. It's not scandal for clicks. It's truth. Messy, emotional, human truth. Sally Struthers isn't rewriting history. She's preserving it. Because behind every TV legend, behind every cultural icon, there's a heartbeat that the world never hears. And now, after 50 years of silence, she's making sure that heartbeat, Carroll's, keeps echoing. When she steps off stage and the lights dim, she often whispers to herself, "I hope you're watching, Carroll. We did it right." And maybe, just maybe, that's the most powerful ending of all. Sally Struthers doesn't recognize Hollywood anymore. The lights are brighter, the stars are younger, and the fame burns faster than ever before. "Back then, we had to earn attention," she once said. "Now, people go viral for accidents." She's not being bitter, she's being real. Because Sally remembers a time when acting was about storytelling, not algorithms. When a good script meant something, not just trending hashtags. She watches interviews now. Young actors chasing validation like it's oxygen. Plastic smiles, perfect filters, fame bought and sold in clicks. And she can't help but wonder, where's the soul? When she sees a red carpet today, she doesn't see stars. She sees exhaustion. She sees fear. The same fear she once felt, but multiplied by millions of screens and endless judgment. "It's like everyone's living in front of a mirror that never turns off," she said softly, "and they call it progress." Sally knows what that kind of pressure does. It eats away at your joy. It replaces authenticity with performance. It turns people into characters in their own lives, just like Archie and Gloria were. Except now, there's no director to yell cut. She believes Carroll O'Connor would have hated this version of Hollywood. The shallow fame, the constant outrage, the noise. He believed in truth, the messy, uncomfortable kind that made people think. If Carroll were alive today, Sally once said, he'd be cancelled in 5 minutes, but remembered forever, because he didn't play safe. He didn't chase applause. He chased honesty. And that's something Sally fears the industry is losing fast. She sees actors afraid to be human, directors too scared to offend, and audiences too distracted to feel. That's why Sally's voice matters now more than ever. She's not trying to relive the past. She's trying to remind the present what truth sounds like. If there's one thing Sally Struthers has learned after half a century in show business, it's this. Fame doesn't define you. How you handle truth does. She remembers something Carroll told her once, long after the cameras stopped rolling. You can play a hero or a villain, but when the curtain falls, people only remember the human being you really were. Those words stayed with her. They became her compass. Every time she steps onto a stage or gives a speech, she carries them like a secret mantra. Now, at 78, she sees the industry through completely different eyes. She sees young actors chasing relevance instead of purpose, producers cutting stories down to fit attention spans shorter than commercials, and audiences drowning in noise but starving for meaning. And she says it straight. No filter, no PR polish. We've traded depth for distraction, emotion for entertainment, connection for clicks. That's not just a critique, it's a warning. Because Sally believes the moment art stops being honest, it stops being art. That's why she still performs. Not for fame, not for money, but because stories still matter. Because connection still matters. Because kindness, the one thing Carroll O'Connor taught her to never underestimate, still changes people. When she talks to young actors after a show, she tells them something they never forget. You can go viral in a day, but to be remembered for love, that takes a lifetime. That line, simple, emotional, true, has made more than one audience cry. Because deep down, everyone knows she's right. And that's what makes Sally's story so powerful. She's not selling nostalgia. She's selling perspective. A truth that feels rare in a world built on illusion. Before she leaves the stage each night, she always takes one quiet breath and looks up at the lights. Maybe the same way Carroll once did. And she whispers, almost to herself, we did what we came to do, Carroll. We made them feel something. Then she smiles, walks off and disappears into the dark, not needing applause, because she already has peace. Sally Struthers used to think success was a straight line. You start at the bottom, you climb, you reach the top, and then you're happy. But that's not how it went. Nobody tells you, she says, that the higher you climb, the lonelier the air gets. She thought happiness was in applause, in interviews, in the faces of fans who said, you changed my life. But the truth, the moments that actually mattered were never the ones on camera. They were the quiet ones. 3 a.m. phone calls with friends, late-night laughter on set, a kind word from Carroll when she felt invisible. I used to chase the light, she said. Now I realize the light was never out there, it was always inside. That realization didn't come overnight. It came through heartbreak. Through years of fading fame, personal loss, and silence that felt louder than any applause ever could. She remembers sitting alone once, years after All in the Family, scrolling through old photos. Everyone was gone. Carol Jean Stapleton, the crew. The laughter frozen in those pictures was from another lifetime. And in that moment, she said something to herself out loud. I thought fame would make me unforgettable. But love is what actually lasts. That was the turning point. She stopped chasing relevance. She started chasing meaning. Now, she doesn't care if people remember Gloria Stivic. She just hopes they remember Sally Struthers, the woman who tried to make the world a little softer. Because that's the part of her story no camera ever captured. The transformation from fame to peace. And that transformation, more than any Emmy or headline, is what defines her. The irony, she says with a smile, is that I had to lose the spotlight to finally see myself clearly. And that line, simple, honest, poetic, is exactly why people can't stop listening. Because it's not just her story, it's ours. Sally doesn't like the word ending. She says stories don't end, they echo. Every time someone watches All in the Family, Carroll O'Connor is alive again. Every time a young actor hears her speak about kindness, his lessons live on. Every time a fan says, that show changed how I see the world, that's legacy. People think legacy is about being remembered, she says. But really, it's about being felt. That's why she keeps telling these stories, because Carroll O'Connor wasn't just a co-star. He was a teacher, wrapped in sarcasm and truth. He showed her and the world that comedy could change conversations, that truth could hide inside laughter. And now, years later, Sally carries that torch like it's sacred. Every performance, every interview, every tear-filled story, it's her way of saying thank you. But here's where it gets deeper. Sally knows time is running out. She doesn't say it dramatically. She says it peacefully. When I go, she once told a friend, I just hope I leave the world a little kinder than I found it. That sentence stops people cold, because it's not fame, it's not money, it's legacy distilled into a single breath. She doesn't want statues or documentaries. She wants laughter in living rooms. She wants empathy in conversations. She wants people to remember that behind every character, every Archie, every Gloria, there was a human heart trying to understand the world. Carroll taught me something no script ever could, she says. He taught me that the most powerful stories are the ones that make people feel seen. That's the kind of truth you can't fake. That's the kind of truth people share. Not because it's scandalous, but because it's real. So when the lights go down and Sally walks off stage for what might be the last time, there's no grand finale. No tears, just a quiet smile. Because she knows, somewhere out there, someone's rewatching an old episode, laughing again, learning again, feeling again. And that's the point. That's the purpose. That's the ending that isn't really an ending at all. It's a beginning that keeps looping forever. We didn't just make a show, she says. We made history, and history still has a heartbeat,